The president plans to sign it tonight, and employees should expect to return to work in the morning. Joining me now is Congresswoman Karen Bass, Democrat from California. And Congresswoman, how'd you feel about casting a vote that, well, you could have cast 16 days ago?
Well, you know, I think this is just really sad. I mean, I'm happy that it's done and that people will be back to work tomorrow. I tell you, I walked through the halls of Congress and I felt bad with all of the workers who are here, even though they're not being paid. So they'll be paid again. But this is really a sad chapter. We have to really take a step back and reflect on this now. Why did this happen? What was this for? We could have taken this vote 3 weeks ago. This was completely unnecessary.
Do you think that your colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle, do you think they've learned anything? Did you get a sense when you were in that chamber tonight as everyone was voting and milling around? What was the atmosphere in there?
Well, you know, the atmosphere was really, I think, a general sense of relief. I mean, amongst the Democrats, people were very, very united. But, you know, we didn't take any pleasure in trying to pour salt in a wound, and so there was no demonstration of joy or anything like that. But, you know, I think amongst a lot of my Republican colleagues, and I've heard this over the last 3 weeks, many of them were embarrassed, many of them were conflicted, and then some of them are just absolute zealots. And so if your purpose of coming to Washington was to reduce government, was to shut government down, if that was your attitude when you came here, then I suppose what happened over the last 3 weeks is consistent with your mission. And that's sad.
You have 144 Republicans that voted against this resolution. No Democrats voted against it. The majority of the Republican caucus, after all of this, after 16 days of a shutdown, after getting the fight that they wanted, after being beaten in the most humiliating and abject fashion imaginable, after all of that, you still had a majority of the Republican caucus voting against this.
Right, exactly. And so, you know, I am hoping that as we all go home and go back to our districts, that my Republican colleagues take a moment of reflection and really do some soul searching and say, because, you know, in another 3 months, we're going to be right back at this, right? So are we going to take the country and then, frankly, the world through this trauma again just to demonstrate something that makes no sense at all? You remember when this started, this was about they didn't want to see health care for 30 million people who don't have health care. That was their objective. And then they quickly abandoned that and they shifted. Now, one of the things that was accomplished tonight is that we appointed conferees to the Budget Committee. You know, Chris, Democrats have been trying to do that since the beginning of this year. Now, all of a sudden, we have a conference committee, and I'm glad that's happening, but that's something that could have been done months ago.
So what do you want to see out of these next few months as the normal or quasi-normal budgetary process commences? A budgetary process that has been dysfunctional and broken since back in 2011. What do you want to see come out of it?
Well, what I hope is that my Republican colleagues will be honest and recognize that even the number that we voted for today, and you know that wasn't an easy vote for Democrats to take, even though we stood united, because that essentially keeps the sequester level funding in place for another couple of months. And we know that our communities have already been hurting because of that. Our economy could be roaring right now if we weren't burdened by the sequester. And so I'm hoping that my colleagues will recognize that more resources are needed to get the economy back going, to have jobs, to provide the services that the government needs to provide. And I'm also hoping that some of my colleagues actually learned a lesson. The government actually does something, you know? I mean, I think some of my colleagues had to learn by the government shutting down, and then they were shocked when memorials were cordoned off. And so maybe they learned a little bit of civics. Maybe they realized that government actually does provide worthy services that everybody needs.
That's a great point, Congressman. Every day of the shutdown, it seemed like Republican lawmakers had a new discovery of something the government was doing that they would like it to keep doing. And maybe that lesson carries forward. Things like nutrition for women and infants may be a good thing to fund. Congresswoman Karen Bass, thank you.